He wasn't loving. He acted like he didn't care that we got married. He told me that he was a Scarborough rapist.
She drugged her 15-year-old sister, carried her to the basement, and presented her to her boyfriend as a virgin sacrifice. Welcome back to True Stories. Join the family in exploring some of the most twisted true crime cases. As always, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Karla Homolka, a veterinary technician, took a vial of sedatives from her employer's workplace in December 1990. She drugged her 15-year-old sister one evening, while her family was hosting a dinner party, dragged her to the basement, and offered her as a virgin sacrifice to her boyfriend, Paul Bernardo. The vicious behavior between Homolka and Bernardo grew worse after that. They started a long-lasting torture campaign that killed several teenage girls, including Homolka's sister. The Ken and Barbie murders were their collective moniker. Bernardo gained notoriety as the Scarborough sexual abuser on his own. However, Karla Homolka's life has changed dramatically in the past 30 years. She happily made a home in Quebec, where she participates in a peaceful neighborhood and volunteers at a nearby elementary school. She seemed to have made significant progress since she was a member of the Ken and Barbie killer's other half. Many analysts think Karla Homolka had psychopathic tendencies from the beginning. They claim that Homolka's harmful tendencies didn't surface until she was in her late teens. For all intents and purposes, Homolka was a typical young child in her early years. She was born on May 4, 1970, and being the oldest of 3 daughters, she grew up in a happy family of 5 in Ontario, Canada. Her schoolmates recall her as intelligent, gorgeous, popular, and an animal lover. Indeed, she started working at a neighborhood veterinarian clinic as soon as she graduated from high school. But then, in 1987, during a fatal midsummer business trip to a veterinary convention in Toronto, Homolka, then 17, met Paul Bernardo, then 23. They clicked right away and grew close. Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka also came to enjoy sadomasochism, with Bernardo acting as the master and Homolka as the enslaved person. Others thought Bernardo had forced Homolka to do the horrible actions that ultimately led to her being imprisoned. Homolka was allegedly just another victim of Bernardo's, according to some. Others, however, believed that Homolka entered the relationship voluntarily and was just as much of a sadistic criminal genius as he was. It is undeniable that Karla Homolka voluntarily gave her own sister to Bernardo. Because Homolka wasn't a virgin when they first met, Bernardo seemed outraged by this. He allegedly instructed Homolka to bring him a virgin female as compensation, and Homolka chose to get her own sister Tammy. Homolka's family hosted a holiday gathering on December 23, 1990. Homolka had stolen sedative vials from the veterinary clinic, where she worked earlier that day. She took her sister downstairs to the bedroom that night, where Bernardo was waiting, and added halcyon to her eggnog. However, Homolka had brought her sister to Bernardo, so this wasn't the first time. She and Bernardo tainted the teenage girl's spaghetti dinner in July with Valium. Still, Bernardo had only sexually assaulted the younger sibling for a minute before she started to regain consciousness. Therefore, the Ken and Barbie killers were more cautious the second time, and Bernardo raped Tammy while she was asleep when she was taken into the bedroom that vacation night. The cloth was covered in halothane. Tammy passed out and then choked to death, most likely due to the medications. Bernardo and Homolka rushed to clean and dress her body, put her on the bed, and pretended that she had vomited while asleep. As a result, her death was determined to be an accident. Despite the tragedy in her family, Homolka and Bernardo were married in a spectacular wedding close to Niagara Falls 6 months later. Homolka allegedly made a commitment to love, honor, and obey Bernardo. Karla Homolka additionally consented to give Bernardo young victims. Another 15-year-old girl, a pet store employee whom Homolka had met through her veterinarian job, was given to her husband by Homolka. Shortly after their nuptials, on June 7, 1991, Homolka extended an invitation to the girl, only known as Jane Doe, for a ladies' night out. Homolka poisoned the girl's drink and brought her to Bernardo at the couple's new house, just as they had done with Tammy. But this time, Homolka committed the assault in front of Bernardo. Fortunately, the young woman survived the experience, albeit the medicines kept her from realizing what had happened until much later. Leslie Mahaffey, a 14-year-old girl, was Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka's penultimate victim, and they discovered her 1 week after assaulting Jane Doe. One night after dark, Mahaffey was making her way home when Bernardo spotted her from his car and stopped over. He dragged Mahaffey into his car and drove to the couple's home when she stopped him to ask for a cigarette. While filming the entire experience, he and Homolka continued to repeatedly assault and abuse Mahaffey. David Bowie and Bob Marley were playing in the background. The audio was permitted, but the videotape was considered too distressing and explicit to play during the trial. On it, Mahaffey screams in agony as Bernardo tells her to submit to him. Mahaffey can be heard saying at one time that the blindfold Homolka had covering her eyes was slipping off, and that she might be able to see them, and subsequently recognize them. That is why Bernardo and Homolka killed someone on purpose for the first time, because they couldn't let it happen. As she had in the past, Homolka poisoned the girl, but this time she gave her a fatal amount. The pair utilized several bags of cement Bernardo bought from the neighborhood hardware store to cover Leslie Mahaffey's body's dismembered parts. The body's filled blocks were then thrown into a nearby lake. These blocks would later wash up on the lakeside, revealing an orthodontic implant that would identify Mahaffey as the third murder victim for the couple. Before that, though, a 15-year-old called Kristen French would become the second adolescent girl to be murdered by the pair in 1992. The duo forced her to drink alcohol, submit to Homolka's and Bernardo's sexual vices, and film themselves assaulting and tormenting her, just as they had done with Leslie Mahaffey. French, however, was never blindfolded, suggesting that the couple knew they would kill their victim immediately. The body of Kristen French was discovered in April 1992. In a roadside ditch, she was hair-free and naked. Later, Homolka acknowledged that she had cut her hair to conceal her identity from the police, not as a souvenir. Karla Homolka was never truly detained for her crimes, despite her involvement in the assault, torture, and murder of 3 young girls. Instead, she surrendered. Paul Bernardo seriously bruised Homolka and put her in the hospital in December 1992, after beating her with a metal flashlight. She was released after claiming to have been in a car accident, but her suspicious friends warned her aunt and uncle that there might have been foul play involved. Authorities in Canada were looking for the alleged Scarborough sexual assaulter at the time, and were convinced they had caught their man in Paul Bernardo. He was fingerprinted, and his cheek swabbed for DNA, just like Homolka. Homolka confessed to her uncle that Bernardo had assaulted her, that he was the Scarborough sexual assaulter, and that she had participated in several of his crimes during that time of interrogation, after learning that Bernardo had been recognized as the assaulter. Homolka did this out of self-preservation. Homolka was horrified, and her family insisted that she call the police, which she did. Homolka started telling the police about Bernardo's crimes right once, including those from before they met that he had boasted about to her.
He wasn't loving. He acted like he didn't care that we got married. He told me that he was a Scarborough rapist.
While their home was being searched, Bernardo's attorney entered and found 100 audio tapes the pair had used to capture their horrible deeds hidden behind a light fixture. The attorney concealed those tapes. Homolka presented herself in court as an unwilling and mistreated pawn in Bernardo's heinous plots. During this period, Homolka divorced Bernardo, and many jurors had the impression that she was merely a victim. In 1993, she and the prosecution struck a plea agreement, and she was given a 12-year prison term with a 3-year parole eligibility period. The decision made by the court was referred to as a deal with the devil by the Canadian press. As a result of what people have called the worst plea deal in Canadian history, Karla Homolka is still facing criticism. On September 1, 1995, Paul Bernardo was given a life sentence after being found guilty of over 30 counts of sexual assault and murder. He was turned down for parole in February 2018. Homolka was released in 2005 amid widespread public outcry that had been present since the news of her brief imprisonment was made public. She remarried and moved to a tiny village in Quebec after being released. Karla Homolka is now, in a sense, a victim of this neighborhood. Out of anxiety and rage over her freedom, neighbors started a Facebook page called Watching Karla Homolka to try and find out where she was. Since then, she has gone by Leanne Teal. She and her new husband lived briefly in the Antilles and Guadeloupe as Leanne Bordelis. Still, as of 2014, they have returned to the Canadian province, where she spends her time avoiding the media, spending time with her family of 3, and assisting at her kids' school events. We've come to the end. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. Till next time.